This is a story that was requested by several of my subscribers, and it's truly a tale of one of the unluckiest bands in rock and roll history. Formed in 1975, metal band Riot, not to be confused with Quiet Riot, was every rock and roll cliche you can think of. Runaway egos, bad business decisions, bad timing, and deaths. I say the plural version of the word because the band suffered not one, not two, not even three, but 4 deaths of their members. Drummer Sandy Slavin, who wasn't an original member but played in the band from 1979 to 1984, would tell Loudersound, "It's just amazing that anything ever happened. When I played with Ace Frehley, we'd be sitting on the bus and everybody would be telling you their music business horror stories. Mine was always just a little bit more horrifying." Was the band cursed, or did they just make bad business decisions? Let's talk about the history of Riot. Riot formed in 1975 when guitarist and bandleader Mark Reale hooked up with drummer Peter Bitelli, bassist Phil Feit, and vocalist Guy Speranza. Reale and Bitelli used to play in a band together called Kon Tiki. The band soon added another member with keyboardist Steve Costello and second guitarist Lou Kouvaris. It was also during this time Phil Feit left the band and was replaced by Jimmy Iommi, and it also seemed the band ditched their keyboard player. Feit would go on to play with Billy Idol, appearing on the song White Wedding. Prior to joining Riot, Guy Speranza sang in a top 40 cover band, but Riot was a whole new animal. This wasn't a cover band. They were writing their own original songs. The band's influences drew heavily on British rock, including Led Zeppelin and Humble Pie, while also creating a harder rocking sound. This was all happening in New York City at a time when disco was popular and punk rock bands were playing at CBGBs. The music that Riot was playing was years ahead of its time, which prevented the band from gaining a foothold in America early in their career. Riot would record a 4-track demo, which they had hoped would be proposed to a record label as part of a New York anthology, a compilation featuring other bands from the city. The idea got noticed by an indie outfit named Firesign Records, but the label was only interested in Riot and none of the other bands. Firesign was run by 2 men, Billy Arnell and Steve Loeb. Arnell and Loeb started their own label, Firesign Records, and owned their own studio in Manhattan. The pair were looking to sign their first big act, thinking it would either be a punk rock act or a new wave band. After hearing Riot's demo, the pair attended a show with Arnell telling Loudersound they sounded great, looked good, and had some fantastic material. Little did we know what was coming, he'd say. This led to one of the worst business decisions the band ever made. They not only signed to Firesign Records, but they employed Loeb and Arnell as their managers and producers for their first 4 records. With Arnell and Loeb wearing so many hats, it was difficult to know where their loyalties lied. The group would release their first record, 1977's Rock City, and despite being ahead of their time, critics were lukewarm to the album, and Rock City did little to make a mark in America. Maybe it had something to do with the album's much derided artwork, a theme we'd see on subsequent records, and it would feature the first appearance of the band's mascot, Tior, who was an axe-wielding seal. Following their debut album, Riot would play a bunch of local gigs around New York City before heading down south to Florida to play a festival that was being headlined by Neil Young. They would follow it up by opening a series of shows across the Rust Belt for the band The Gods. And by 1978, the band even got a chance to open for Sammy Hagar in Texas. It was during the band's dates in Texas they had learned that San Antonio DJ Joe Anthony was a big fan of the band and was heavily playing their debut record on Kiss FM. It was also during the tour to support their first album that guitarist Lou Kouvaris left the band or was fired. Kouvaris would tell the Metal Voice he woke up one morning on tour and discovered that no one was around, and he would receive a phone call shortly after saying his services were no longer needed. A separate source claims that Kouvaris was not heavily involved in the songwriting process and was upset by this. He would be replaced by the group's roadie Rick Ventura just ahead of the band recording their sophomore record. Ventura would tell Loudersound how things ran in the group, saying, "It was Mark's band. He started it. Sometimes we had some conflicts because he wanted the band to be a certain way." The band soon hit the studio again to work on their follow-up album Narita, which was named after a controversial Japanese airport built on an ancient burial ground. It was the band's way of paying homage to Japan, who supported the group early in their career. Once again, their mascot Tior showed up on the front cover, this time dressed as a sumo wrestler, and leaving behind what one could assume was his victims. It was also around this time the band underwent another lineup change, with drummer Pete Bitelli leaving the group and being replaced by Sammy Slavin. Bassist Jimmy Iommi would also leave, being replaced by Kip Lemming. Slavin would tell Loudersound, "I'd never heard of Riot. Mark called me and said his band had just got rid of the rhythm section. I thought, these guys are idiots, they've got a record out, why the F did you break up your band? But Mark seemed real nice. We were both big fans of Montrose," he'd remember. And rock journalist Martin Popoff would tell MetalVoice.com that he suspected that Mark Reale was a quiet guy and not a people person, so he may have been going along with management when it came to what they wanted to see, and that resulted in a lot of lineup changes. Once again, Riot's second record failed to make a mark in the States. Loeb and Arnell started to panic, and they needed to get some heavy hitters in the band's corner. According to the book Heavy Metal: The Definitive Guide, at one point Cliff Bernstein of Q Prime Management was in talks to represent the band, but things fell through. Loeb and Arnell would strike a deal with Fred Heller, who had previously worked with Ian Hunter and Lou Reed. Arnell would tell Loudersound, "Fred made a huge difference because he could get on the phone with label executives. Freddie knew how to make people dance." And with Heller's help, the band landed an opening slot for AC/DC in Texas, alongside Molly Hatchet on their Highway to Hell tour. The members of Riot could feel that they were on the cusp of superstardom, with Slavin telling the same publication, "They were the first arena shows any of us had done. We were like, yeah, we're rock stars now." Billy and Steve were like, "What color Mercedes do you want?" We acted like idiots and busted up some hotel rooms. We went from a 0 to 1,000, he'd remember. But following their AC/DC tour dates, the band returned to New York more disillusioned and frustrated with their careers. Their music didn't appear to have a market in America, and their managers were trying to talk the band into changing their sound to be more radio-friendly, like Journey, Styx, and REO Speedwagon. At one point, it was suggested to the members that they should maybe wear makeup, but they quickly scoffed at the idea. On the verge of calling it quits, Riot would receive a phone call out of the blue. The call would inform the members of the band that their debut album had started to appear on the charts of Sounds Music magazine. It would turn out a local DJ named Neil Kay was heavily promoting the band, and import copies of their debut record were being bought up by metal-loving fans. 1980 was a massive year for the band. Because of their popularity across the pond, they were offered a touring spot opening for Sammy Hagar. Hagar at the time was signed to Capitol Records, who quickly offered Riot a worldwide distribution deal. The same year, the band found themselves on the Black and Blue tour, opening for Black Sabbath and Blue Oyster Cult. Just a side note, I've done a whole video on the riot that happened during the Black and Blue tour in the States. The link is down below. Getting back to the video, Riot would cap 1980 off with an appearance at the first ever Monsters of Rock festival in the UK, as they would be joined by Saxon, the Scorpions, Judas Priest, and Rainbow on the same bill. As Riot turned their attention to their third album, Capitol Records, much like their managers, pushed the band to adopt a more radio-friendly sound. Riot, though, was at a crossroads. They had already built a following in Japan and Europe, and while they hadn't cracked America, they didn't want to transform their sound. The band opted to go in a harder rocking direction, and Capitol was none too pleased, refusing to put out their album. But rather than dropping the band, Capitol prevented the group from leaving the label. It's possible that the whole feud with Capitol Records was made worse by the group's management, who butted heads with the label. Slavin would tell Loudersound, "There was a song by Rick called You're All I Need Tonight that our A&R guy liked. He said it was a big hit, and he took a tape to the executives in LA and played it to them. Then Billy and Steve didn't put the song on the album. It was their way to put the A&R guy in his place. Of course, the A&R looks like an idiot. That's when the label decided that it was commercially unacceptable." Riot's management didn't take the move lightly, and in an effort to get their third album released, they mobilized the group's fan base by sending out a postcard to all the people on their mailing list. Soon enough, artists including Iron Maiden lended their support to the band, and fans started to picket the office of Capitol Records in the UK and in the US. It would be Elektra A&R man Tom Zutaut, who famously signed Motley Crue and Guns N' Roses, who witnessed Riot at a showcase in Brooklyn. Soon enough, Capitol Records released the band from their contract and sold the recordings of their third album to Elektra, and the band found a new label. Elektra would release what many considered to be the pinnacle of Riot's career, 1981's Fire Down Under. To support the album, the band opened for Rush, Triumph, Saxon, and Grand Funk Railroad across the states before heading to the UK. The band at one point was supposed to open for Ozzy Osbourne in the UK, but on the eve of that tour, Fire Down Under entered the Billboard charts in America, and Elektra sent the band back to America to open for Rush during the band's Moving Pictures tour. The album would go on to sell more than 500,000 copies stateside. and the band's star looked to be rising, but things quickly fell apart. Frontman Guy Speranza, who had found religion, was struggling with his identity, while also fighting with management and the record label over money. He was tired of grinding to just make ends meet, and his new wife wasn't a fan of rock music. Speranza revealed to his bandmates while on tour with Grand Funk Railroad that he wanted to leave the group. He would depart the group in December of 1981, following 2 sold-out shows opening for Rush. Guy would be replaced by Rhett Forrester, who played in a New York covers band named Rachel. He would sing on the band's next 2 records, including Restless Breed, which came out the following year, and 1983's Born in America. While Forrester had the stage presence, his unpredictable and volatile behavior also resulted in canceled tours. While opening for Rainbow as part of their Straight Between the Eyes tour, he vanished only to be found in a hospital a week later, suffering from a mysterious illness. And by the time Born in America was released, Riot would be dropped by Elektra, and they had to release the album on an indie label. Soon afterwards, things completely fell apart. Not helping was that in 1983, another metal band named Quiet Riot would have the first metal album in history to top the Billboard charts, creating some confusion amongst fans as to which band was which. By 1984, the band's managers quit, Rick Ventura and Red Forrester followed suit. Not long after, Reale disbanded the group, moved to Texas, and opted to pursue a new musical project called Narita in 1985, named after Riot's second album. Narita would feature members of S.A. Slayer, who I've also done a video on. But the band wouldn't stay together for very long. Slavin would convince Reale to bring back Riot, since the band appeared to still have a big following. By 1986, Riot was back in business, but Speranza and Forrester declined to front the band. A new Riot lineup would emerge, with Satan's host vocalist Harry the Tyrant Conklin fronting the band. However, the band soon ran into trouble when 4 shows into their comeback tour, Conklin blew out his voice. He would leave the group, and Forrester rejoined the band, but upon relocating to Los Angeles, Forrester once again quit, and Reale would go on to eventually land a deal with CBS Records in the late 80s, and put out 10 more albums with a revolving cast of characters. None of those albums, though, would match the success and fanfare of Fire Down Under. The sad story of Riot didn't end there, though. In January of 1994, Forrester would be killed by a gunman during a carjacking in Atlanta. Following his exit from the band, Guy Speranza would leave the music industry and become an exterminator. In fact, there's a famous story that Riot fan, Metallica drummer Lars Ulrich, would once call a pest control company and was amazed when Speranza showed up to his door to answer a service call. Sadly, though, in November of 2003, Speranza would pass away due to pancreatic cancer. Working as an exterminator for almost 2 decades may have had something to do with his cancer diagnosis. And in January of 2012, Mark Reale would succumb to Crohn's disease, a stomach condition he'd been dealing with for most of his life. Then, as recently as this past year, guitarist Lou Kouvaris, who was 66, died due to the coronavirus. That does it for today's video, guys. Thanks for watching. Be sure to hit the like button and subscribe. We'll see you again on Rock and Roll True Stories. Take care.